Listener discretion is advised. This episode discusses homicide, violence, and sensitive themes that may be disturbing to some listeners. Please take care while listening. Hey friends, welcome back to, or if you're new here, welcome to Dark Roast Caffeine Case Files. I'm your host, Kate. This is episode 3 of the Calgary True Crime series. So settle in, pour yourself something strong, and take this one slow. It's a late afternoon of October 26, 2015 in Calgary, Alberta. The dispatcher on the other end of the line is trained to expect everything: car accidents, fires, domestic disputes. But the voice on this call is different. It's a man, and he's not just upset. He's shattered. His words are choking, gasping, barely intelligible. He's saying there's blood everywhere, that his wife is cold, that she's in the basement. The address is on Castledale Way in the northeast community of Castle Ridge. When the first officers arrive, they're met by a man on the front porch. He's shaking uncontrollably. One of the first responders on scene, Sergeant Trent Peterson of the Calgary Police Service, later described the sight of him. Quote, "As I got near the front door, I could see that Lee was shaking and he was visibly upset. But the real horror was waiting downstairs." Sergeant Peterson would later utter a phrase that has come to define this case. He said, quote, "This was the bloodiest scene I'd ever walked in on. Quite frankly, it was gruesome. This wasn't just a death, it was a scene of inexplicable violence. And yet, nearly a decade later, we are still asking the most fundamental question. What the hell happened to Amanda and Tony?" Today, we're not just retelling a story. We're going to tear it apart piece by piece. We're going to look at the woman Amanda was, the marriage she built, the gruesome details of the crime scene, the forensic paradoxes that baffled investigators, and the family's relentless, decade-long fight for the truth. A fight that recently landed on the world stage with Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. This is a dive into the case they call The Body in the Basement. Before she was a case file, before she was a headline, before she was the woman lying at the bottom of the stairs, Amanda was a little girl from Carstairs, Alberta, a small town about 50 kilometers north of Calgary. Amanda Christy Lan Hogg Antoni was born on June 5th, 1984. Her entry into the world was marked by a twist of fate. Details about her biological parents remain private, known only to those closest to her. But when she was just 2 months old, her life took a beautiful turn. A loving couple named Leslie and Linda Hogg welcomed her into their home as foster parents and eventually adopted her, giving her a forever family. At the time, the Hogg household was already a busy one. Amanda joined 2 older teenage brothers, Alan and Daryl, who instantly became her fiercely protective guardians. Imagine the scene. A tiny baby girl arriving in a house full of rowdy boys. Her brother Daryl later shared how they cherished watching her personality blossom. She was the undisputed princess of the family, and they wouldn't have had it any other way. Growing up in Carstairs, Amanda was known for one thing above all else: her radiant, magnetic personality. She was the person who could walk into a room, as her brother Daryl would later put it to Global News. Quote, "Lit up the room every time she came in. She was a prankster, playful and full of life. She had a profound, almost spiritual love for animals. She rescued 2 cats and a dog, and her compassion was so deep that she even adopted a vegetarian lifestyle. She was the kind of person, friends say, who would buy groceries for a stranger in need or deliver supplies to the homeless in Calgary. She wasn't just kind, she was actively, determinedly kind. By 2004, a 20-year-old Amanda was ready for the next chapter. She left Carstairs and moved to Calgary, where a mutual friend introduced her to a man named Lee Antoni. The connection was immediate. Lee loved to party in those early days, found a grounding force in Amanda. They were, by all accounts, separable. By 2006, they had bought a home together on Castledale Way, a modest house in a working-class neighborhood. It was their first real stake in the ground. In 2009, they made it official, getting married in front of their friends and family. But marriage is complex. It's not a fairy tale, it's a partnership. And like any partnership, the Antonis had their stresses. By all accounts, Amanda was the more stable partner professionally. She started her own house cleaning business, becoming the primary breadwinner, while Lee, by his own admission and the account of her brothers, struggled to hold down a steady job. This created tension. They had fights about money, about stability. However, it's critical to note that this tension did not lead to. However, it's crucial to note what this tension did not lead to. Police confirmed there was no reported history of domestic conflict between the couple. They had never been called to the house for a domestic dispute. Her family insists they were, despite the normal stresses of life, the best of friends. They built a life of simple joys, camping trips, concerts, and weekend getaways. They had just returned from a trip to San Francisco with Amanda's mother and stepfather before that fateful October. They had a dog named Ruby, a black lab, who was part of the family. To the outside world, they were a normal couple, grinding through life together with their ups and downs in their house on Castledale Way. Nothing about their life suggested that it would end in a pool of blood at the bottom of the basement stairs. Let's set the stage for the weekend of October 24th, 2015. Lee and Tony had plans to drive to Saskatchewan to visit his mother. There was some family business to attend to regarding a property. Amanda was supposed to go with them. They rarely spent weekends apart. But Amanda suffered from severe, debilitating migraines. It was a chronic condition she dealt with. On the morning of departure, Friday, October 23rd, she woke up with a bad one. The decision was made. Amanda would stay home with Ruby, rest in a dark, quiet house, and let the migraine pass. Lee kissed her goodbye and hit the road. For the next 24 hours, everything seemed normal. They stayed in close contact via phone calls and texts. Lee would check on her headache. She'd say it was still bad, but she was managing. The timeline tightens on Saturday, October 24th, around 7 p.m. Lee called Amanda again. This was their last conversation. Here's what Lee has consistently told investigators. The call started normally. Amanda told him her headache was finally starting to subside, a moment of relief after 2 long days. They were chatting, maybe making plans for his return. Then something happened. Lee recalls that Ruby, their dog, suddenly started to bark and yelp in the background. It wasn't a normal bark, it was frantic. He heard Amanda's muffled voice, trying to calm the dog down, and then he heard a loud, unsettling sound, a crunching sound, and then the line went dead. Lee tried calling her back immediately. It went straight to voicemail. He sent texts, nothing. He figured maybe her phone died, or she dropped it in the commotion with the dog. He didn't think much more of it and went to sleep. Sunday came. He tried calling again. Nothing. All day, he sent more texts. Silence. This was not like her. A knot of worry began to form in his stomach. By Sunday night, he made a decision that would haunt him forever. He would cut his trip short. He would drive home first thing Monday morning to surprise her. Maybe he was being paranoid, but he just needed to see her. Before he left his mother's house, he called one more time. Still nothing. Early in the afternoon on Monday, October 26th, Lee and Tony pulled up to his house on Castledale Way. The first thing he noticed was the eerie silence. He called out for Amanda. Nothing. He walked into the living room. It was chaotic. He saw Amanda's phone lying on the dining room floor, shattered. A chair was overturned. This wasn't right. Then he noticed the basement door. It was a place Amanda rarely went. She didn't like it down there. It was a dark, unfinished, a place for storage, not for his wife. He walked down the 13 steps into the dimly lit space. At the foot of the stairs, lying in a massive, dark, congealed pool of blood, was his wife. She was cold to the touch. She was in rigor mortis. His call to 911 is heartbreaking. He is hysterical, telling the operator his wife is cold. that there is blood everywhere. He can barely form sentences. When first responders arrived, they found Lee on the front porch, a man utterly destroyed. Sergeant Peterson, the first officer, immediately recognized the severity. He told the next responding officer to stay with Lee while he went inside. What he found downstairs would stick with him forever. Let's walk into that basement with the investigators. It's important to visualize this because the scene itself tells a story, but it's a story full of contradictions. The basement was not a living space. It was utilitarian, and at the bottom of the wooden stairs, Amanda's body lay. The blood loss was catastrophic. The walls and floor were covered in spatter. It was, in Sergeant Peterson's words, gruesome. But as the homicide unit, led by Staff Sergeant Sean Gregson, began to process the scene, the details got weirder and weirder. First, there was the matter of entry. They checked every door, every window. There was no sign of forced entry. This is the first major fork in the road. It means one of three things. Either Amanda let her killer in, the killer had a key, or there was no killer at all. Second, they looked at the objects. Upstairs in the dining room, a chair was overturned. Amanda's phone was on the floor, shattered, as if it had been thrown or stomped on. This suggests a struggle. Something happened up here before whatever happened downstairs. Then, the basement. At the top of the basement stairs, on a ledge, there was a ceramic piggy bank. It was broken. And here's the critical detail. Fragments of that piggy bank were found scattered around Amanda's body in the basement. In fact, shards of it were embedded into her forehead. Had she been struck with it? Was it the weapon? Third, there was the position of the body and the evidence of movement. Investigators found bloody bare footprints at the base of the stairs. They were determined to be Amanda's. This is a haunting revelation. It means that at some point after her initial injury, she was alive. She was conscious. She stood up. She was facing the stairs, just feet from safety. Staff Sergeant Sean Gregson later voiced the question that has haunted everyone who has looked at this case. Quote, "Why didn't Amanda go up the stairs? I think that's one of the biggest ones in my mind. If she was injured and in the basement, why not go back upstairs?" It's a horrifying image. She was down there, bleeding profusely from a head wound. She managed to get to her feet, but instead of climbing the 13 steps to safety to a phone to help, she stayed. Was she too disoriented from the trauma? Was she too weak? Was she hiding from someone who was still up there? Or was she simply not alone and unable to escape? Now, enter the forensic team. They went over that house with a fine-tooth comb. They looked for fingerprints, for footprints, hair, DNA, touch DNA, anything that didn't belong to Amanda or Lee. They found nothing. Not a single trace of another human being. Every fingerprint, every drop of blood, except for the massive pool, every hair was either Amanda's or Lee's. And Lee had been out of the province for 48 hours. The scene screamed violence. An overturned chair, a shattered phone, a broken weapon, a body with a catastrophic injury, and evidence the victim stood up but didn't flee. But the science whispered a different story. Amanda had been alone. With the scene processed, all eyes turned to two things, the body and the husband. First, the husband. Lee Antoni was immediately a person of interest. In any death of a spouse, they have to be. He was cooperative, but police interrogated him hard. In the official interrogation footage, which was later featured in the documentary, the investigating officer gets right in his face and asks him point blank, "Are you involved, Lee? Because I'm going to find out." Lee's response was immediate and emphatic. I'm not, man. Go right ahead. I was at my mom's all weekend." Police didn't take his word for it. They checked his alibi meticulously. They pulled surveillance footage from gas stations along his route to and from Saskatchewan. The footage confirmed his timeline. They checked his phone records, which confirmed he was miles away when the call disconnected on Saturday night. They even explored the theory that he might have hired someone to kill her. After an exhaustive search of his finances, phone records, and communications, they found zero evidence to support that. Lee Antoni was cleared as a suspect. So if it wasn't Lee, and there was no evidence of an intruder, they had to turn to the body for answers. The autopsy report from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner was released, and it added more layers to the mystery. It determined Amanda's cause of death, blunt force trauma, leading to massive blood loss. The official time of death was estimated to be between 7 and 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, October 24th, the exact window of that final disconnected phone call with Lee. But the full autopsy held specific, strange clues. Despite the brutal scene, there was no brain trauma. In fact, the only broken bone in her entire body was her right orbital bone, the bone surrounding her eye. This is a significant detail. A fall down the stairs can cause many injuries, but a broken orbital bone is often associated with a direct blow to the face. This, combined with the piggy bank fragments found on her forehead, led investigators to theorize she was struck with it. But again, the lack of any other DNA made it impossible to prove it was a weapon, rather than something she broke during a fall. There was also no evidence of SA, ruling out one of the most common motives for a stranger attack. So where does that leave us? By December 2016, over a year after Amanda's death, the Calgary Police Service arrived at a conclusion. They closed the case, their official ruling, accidental death. But that ruling has never sat right with everyone. Let's break down the theories, because the devil is in the details. This theory posits that Amanda was carrying a ceramic piggy bank upstairs. She tripped on the steps, fell hard, and the piggy bank shattered, with a sharp piece striking her in the face and causing the orbital fracture. The fall caused the severe laceration on her head. In a daze, she stood up, leaving the bloody footprints, but her injuries were too severe, and she collapsed again, bleeding to death in minutes. It explains the lack of foreign DNA and the lack of forced entry. It's the simplest explanation. It doesn't explain the overturned chair upstairs. It doesn't explain the shattered phone upstairs. It doesn't explain why, if she was well enough to stand, she didn't try to climb the stairs. And her family points out to the family dog, Ruby. Dogs are sensitive to their owners. If Amanda had been lying injured in the basement for nearly 48 hours, why didn't Ruby go down there? Why didn't the dog bark or whine or try to get to her? It doesn't make sense. This theory is supported by some neighbors. A few reported hearing a dog barking frantically that Saturday evening. One neighbor even claimed to have seen someone running away from the area through the backyard. The Castle Ridge neighborhood did have a higher crime rate, and transients had been known to go into yards to collect recyclables. In this scenario, an intruder confronts Amanda. A struggle ensues upstairs. The overturned chair, the shattered phone. She flees to the basement, is caught, struck with a piggy bank, and killed. The intruder then flees, leaving no trace. It explains the violence, the struggle, and the neighbors' reports. The lack of any forensic evidence is almost statistically impossible for a violent struggle. No hair, no fibers, no DNA, no fingerprints. It's a perfect crime scenario that real life rarely allows. Also, if it was a random transient, why would they clean up after themselves? They wouldn't. Given the lack of forced entry, this is the most likely scenario if it was foul play. Amanda let her killer in. Who could it be? Lee was cleared. But what about someone else? Lee mentioned that Amanda had ongoing issues with his sister, who struggled with addiction. There had been tension after Amanda and Lee reported concerns to Child Protective Services about the sister's child. Police interviewed her, but again, no evidence linked her to the crime. It explains the lack of forced entry. It explains a potential motive, anger, revenge. Again, the lack of DNA. If it was someone she knew and they struggled, there would be a transfer evidence There is none. The family is left with a gut feeling, but no proof. For Amanda's family, her mother Linda, and her brothers Alan and Daryl, the accidental death ruling was not closure. It was a betrayal. They saw the scene photos. They knew their daughter, their sister. They refused to believe she simply fell. In the years since, the Hogg family has been relentless. They've pushed for answers. They've kept Amanda's memory alive on social media, in interviews, in their hearts. And in 2024, their efforts paid off in a major way. Amanda's story was featured on the Netflix revival of Unsolved Mysteries in an episode titled Body in the Basement. The episode brought international attention to the case. Calgary police even held a press conference coinciding with the release, stating they submitted the case to the show in the hopes that new public attention could resolve any outstanding doubt once and for all. Staff Sergeant Gregson reiterated, quote, "As homicide investigators, it is our duty to seek closure and provide a victim's family with answers without a shadow of doubt." So where is everyone today? Lee Antoni still resides in Calgary. The documentary shows him still struggling with the unanswered questions, living with the trauma of finding his wife. He maintains his innocence. Linda Hogg, Amanda's mother, still lives in Calgary. She finds solace in quiet hobbies like photography, often capturing images of the small birds that visit her home. It is a peaceful pursuit that offers a respite from the storm of uncertainty that has surrounded her daughter's death for nearly a decade. She carries her grief quietly but persistently. Daryl Hogg, Amanda's older brother, has built a life in Red Deer, Alberta, working in sales and operations. Like his sister, he is an animal lover and has 2 dogs. But he's never forgotten his little sister. He feels a duty to find the truth, to find who he believes is her killer. He keeps her memory alive, passing it on to his own children. Alan Hogg, the other protective big brother, is now a successful entrepreneur, owning a trucking business in central Alberta called Above and Beyond Trucking. He runs it with his wife, Tanya. The drive to find justice for Amanda is part of his daily life. Telling her story, reminding the world who she was, is his mission. The basement on Castledale Way is just a room now. The blood has been cleaned, the house likely sold or lived in by strangers. But for the Hogg family, that space is a permanent void where answers should be. Amanda Antoni was a woman who lit up rooms, who loved animals, who would buy groceries for a stranger. She was a wife, a daughter, and a sister. And on October 24th, 2015, in her own home, something happened that ended her life and left a crater in the lives of everyone who loved her. Let's go back to the core questions that remain unanswered. The overturned chair. If she fell down the stairs, why was the dining room chair knocked over? What happened up there? The shattered phone. Why was her phone destroyed on the main floor, not in the basement? The dog's silence. Why didn't Ruby, the loyal family dog, go to her owner for 48 hours? Why didn't she bark for help? The bloody footprints. Amanda stood up. She was facing the stairs. Why didn't she climb them? Was something standing at the top, preventing her escape? The missing DNA. In this era of advanced forensic science, how can a violent struggle leave no trace of a second person? Is it really possible, or does the lack of evidence point to a different kind of truth? Was it a tragic slip on the stairs, or was it a violence that went unpunished? The lack of evidence that points to an intruder is the strongest argument, but the physical evidence of a struggle is the strongest argument against it. If you know anything at all about what happened to Amanda Antoni, Calgary police want to hear from you. You can call them at 403-266-1234, or you can leave an anonymous tip with the Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Amanda's story is a haunting reminder that the truth doesn't always come easily. Sometimes it hides in the shadows at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for someone to turn on the light. For the Hogg family, the wait for that light has been agonizing. They are not just waiting for closure, they are waiting for justice for Amanda, the little girl from Carstairs who grew up to be the light of every room she entered. If you have theories on the case, reach out on social media. In the next episode, I will be starting another 3-part series going all the way back to the Roaring Twenties, titled The Dry and the Damned. Thank you for listening to The Body in the Basement. As always, stay safe and please take care of yourself after listening to this episode. Do something grounding, call a friend, pet a dog. Sit in the sunlight for a few minutes. The darkness in these stories is real, but so is the light in the world. Don't forget to find it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please follow me on Substack, Instagram, and Facebook. The links are in the show notes. Stay tuned for more coffee and more crime. Bye now.